Security group, we had a great conversation, so I'm just going to run through some of what we talked about. The main things we focused on was looking really at the issues around peace and security in all of the member states and trying to establish strategies for cooperation around these issues. Oh, sorry, talking too fast. My American accent, sorry. Okay, try to talk slower. Okay, like I was saying, really looking at the major issues and then figuring out strategies for cooperation around them. At the ECOWAS level, we know there have been mechanisms. We also know there have been strategies that have been recommended, but really figuring out what those priorities are within those mechanisms and then really figuring out solutions around them. There was also conversation about what is happening in some of the member states, depending on where they were, and what can we do to prevent these crises, and what the major problems affecting them were, and why some of the conventions have not been updated based on this, why some countries have ratified it and why some countries have not, and then really looking at what the role of civil society really is. And so things that were talked about included the ECOWAS prevention framework. It was mentioned that it is a good tool to implement peace and conflict resolution and security, but really how do we decentralize this framework at the national level so states can take responsibility for actually implementing them in the countries. But we know that bureaucracy has been an issue about implementing them, so really how does civil society help around that? There was also conversations around early warning systems from the community level, and really, using that and addressing issues around insurgency, terrorism, fundamentalism, and also addressing the issue of elections as well, since we know that it has caused violence in many countries. So really, what can civil society do around implementing and strengthening the protocol so that it actually helps with that as well? And also looking for promoting enhanced synergy between and among the bodies within, still talking too fast? Okay. Sorry, I'm very used to talking fast. I apologize. Okay. Also, going back to what I was saying, enhanced synergy between and among the bodies within the ECOWAS Commission and also within WASCOF, making sure it's more representative of the issues that we're talking about and also the protocols as well. A lot of conversation also happened about the need to go through the grassroots and dealing with the issue of violence from that perspective, also figuring out how to promote dialogue as well. But someone also mentioned something really important around knowing what the status of this protocol is. We know that there are documents around it, but the issue of lack of resources is a serious concern. And so figuring out how to deal with the issue of resources, because a lot of it is being funded by the EU or by US aid, and really figuring out how member states can actually fund this themselves as well, and really do a better job of implementing and ratifying this protocol. But there was also mention of diversifying and partnering with different groups and different organizations as well in that vein. There was also conversation about the Peace Summit that is happening as well. There was some complaint about was civil society actually involved in the conversations around the Peace Summit? It was mentioned that different meetings had happened from the experts' perspective, from the civil society perspective, the ministers, and then there's going to be a president's meeting as well. But was civil society really involved in that protocol and in defining it as well? And especially looking at the current issues that should be included in the revision of the protocol. So I think I've highlighted most of it, so thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. For the governance group, does that capture, in essence, your conversation, or you want to? Sorry, peace and security. Sorry. Does that capture your conversation, or you want to make any inputs from the floor?
Maybe just the only addition we were very specific about is the need for the private sector to invest on issues of peace and security within the region. How do we harness that, and how do we also ensure that national governments begin to take ownership in terms of the new move for the establishment of the National Early Warning and Response Mechanism at the member state level? How do member states invest more on that so that you don't have a situation where you're waiting for X or Y partner to be able to implement the program's contents of the National Early Warning and Response Mechanism? But more importantly, how do we ensure that the private sector that in any case have a stake on issues of peace and security begin to invest more on that?
Thanks very much for the Peace and Security Working Group. Now we'll take the governance team. Let's hear your report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I didn't really think I was going to give the report, but here I am. We talked about protocol, basically. And we tried to understand, okay, yes, we know protocol is more about the governance, democracy procedure, just following through with everything. But the main issue is the violation of constitution by leaders, either by extending their tenure or taking the position by force. And we stated that any modification of the constitution should not be more than 6 months, tops 6 months. And we really we talked about the issues at the grassroots level, and well, most people at the grassroots don't get to know about what's happening in time or at all, because most times the conflict may actually be our political parties. The protocol prohibits any extension of power beyond the legally stated time. All strategies by government is based on state personalization, in the sense that most times, most member states are wanting to hold on to their problems and saying it's all ours, it's not for everybody out there, let's deal with it our way, it is our government. It's all a personalized thing, which also affects the member state, because ECOWAS is supposed to be one body. The protocol is supposed to fall through the states, not just personalized in each member state. And most people don't want the external interference. Another problem that we seem to have in protocol stage is tackling the problem, which is having to forego an amount of seniority to get past it. You have to expose yourself to the outside world, where most people feel, oh no, I don't want to let other people know what's happening with us. And another thing again that we discussed was that there's a gap between the parliament, the CSOs, and and others in an executive level, because where protocol is actually decided is on that executive level, where you just sit down, they discuss the terms, they decide, and then they just let people know. But then again, who are the people that are they're actually telling? Because it's like segregation of power at different levels, and whether the Commission, the Court of Justice, or the Parliament, whatever it is that the ECOWAS countries have signed and agreed on, how is it being implemented? There's a question that came up and says, who is implementing this? Who do we hold responsible for implementation? Yes, a decision has been made, but then again, how do we go about it? Who is actually taking charge? Who is following up? And everybody had a different thing to say concerning that. Well, bottom line, there's been a lack of coordination between organizations. And there were suggestions that certain CSOs can actually follow up on this. And the lack of organization is also causing a big problems. That's why a majority of the protocol, everybody feels they have a right to say what they want to say, not what everybody is saying at once. Everybody's looking at themselves as individuals and not as a team, not as a one body, which is what ECOWAS is supposed to stand for in the first place. Now, apart from the CSOs playing alongside other partners, we could also think about ourselves as an individual. Think about try and follow up on what's happening, and also trying to take a stand to move forward on it. And we also talked about ECOWAS having a monetary body which would monitor each member state of ECOWAS, so that we can all move in one accord. There's a difference between policies being taken on the executive level. There's a difference between actually taking a decision and implementing that decision. And we suggested if ECOWAS could actually have a monitoring body that could take charge of that in each member state, it would actually move from where we are now to where we actually want to be. And also providing information for the citizens, which is key, because who are we taking these decisions for? It's the citizens. So there's no point taking a decision and thinking it ends at that level. It needs to be implemented everywhere we are. So providing information for the citizen is number one in terms of protocol, because we need to pass across that information. When a particular country has done what it's supposed to do, what it isn't supposed to do, it should be brought to justice. We should find a way of penalizing such member state by either holding back something from them, whether from World Bank loans, or just find a fine way that would actually pinch them where it hurts, so that they can actually conform to the rules and regulation and we can move in one accord. Bottom line of what we talked about is people should be informed about what a policy is and how it should be implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much from the governance team. Any additions from the rest of the group? Please go ahead. Let's keep it short.
Je voudrais ajouter certains aspects. C'est-à-dire, nous avons constaté que le grand problème, c'est la souveraineté des États qu'on invoque. Cela fait que la CEDEAO n'a pas une certaine primauté sur nos États. Et donc, il va falloir que des décisions soient prises pour que nos États puissent céder un peu leur souveraineté. Donc, les propositions au niveau des institutions de la CEDEAO aussi se posent. C'est-à-dire qu'il doit y avoir une certaine indépendance entre la Commission, entre le Parlement et la Cour. Un mécanisme, la CEDEAO doit avoir un mécanisme de suivi pour voir comment les décisions sont appliquées au niveau national. Et pour les sanctions, il faut la vulgarisation des sanctions déclaratives et il faut que la société civile fasse des rapports alternatifs dans nos différents pays, parce que les pays font des rapports mais qui ne reflètent pas la réalité. Voilà ce que je voudrais ajouter. Je ne sais pas s'il y a d'autres.
Ouais, il faut mettre l'accent sur la redevabilité. Aujourd'hui, nos États sont redevables vis-à-vis de leur population, mais ils ne le font pas. Et donc, nous voudrions également qu'au niveau des outils que la CEDEAO va, disons, innover, il faut mettre l'accent sur la redevabilité, la gestion assise sur les résultats de développement. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Juste pour enfoncer le clou et renforcer les différentes interventions, c'est qu'en fait, on a été amené à constater que la crise de gouvernance qui prévaut dans les États est transposée au niveau de la commission de la CEDEAO. Je m'explique. La plupart du temps, l'exécutif a l'impression que ce qu'il détermine comme politique au niveau de la commission de la CEDEAO est la politique nationale, en ignorant le fait que l'État c'est un tout. Il y a ce qu'on appelle l'exécutif, le législatif et le judiciaire. Donc le mépris de l'exécutif vis-à-vis des autres institutions républicaines déteint même sur ses relations avec les organisations de la société civile. Là où on n'a pas eu d'égard pour les institutions républicaines, très souvent la collaboration avec la société civile devient difficile. Ce qui fait qu'il faut œuvrer de manière à ce qu'au niveau de la commission de la CEDEAO, chacune des institutions représentées ait la légitimité requise, quitte à aller jusqu'à instaurer un choix des parlementaires qui se fait au niveau national pour éviter la cooptation qui est souvent utilisée au niveau de la CEDEAO et qui a une incidence négative sur l'influence que pourrait avoir le Parlement de la CEDEAO sur la Commission de la CEDEAO et sur les États.
I
Bien, rapidement, une seconde. Hein. J'ajoute tout simplement qu'il y a un mécanisme de prévention et de gestion des conflits dans le protocole sur la gouvernance et la démocratie, c'est la médiation. La médiation a été toujours l'affaire des sages ou de ce qu'on appelle les sages au niveau de la CEDEAO. Nous aimerions à ce que ce mécanisme soit ouvert à la société civile. Parce que quand on mène la médiation, il faut avoir une certaine impartialité et une certaine neutralité. Et nous avons vu beaucoup de médiations de ces anciens chefs d'État échouer. Donc nous recommandons à ce que FOSCAO soit associé à ce mécanisme dans l'espace CEDEAO. Je vous remercie.
Please, if there are any other suggestions, ideas, comments, you can just put it down in writing and give to the Secretariat, and I'm sure we'll find a way of working it into the business of the day. So I would quickly turn over to the Gender Working Group for their own report, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Favor Ochulo from CWSI in Abuja. Hello, I am representing the gender. Are you hearing me? Hello, are you hearing? Okay, my name is Favor Chidema Ochulo. I'm representing CWSI and the gender group. Our group actually talked on key issues with subheadings on actors, strategy, and recommendation. And in our deliberations under the actors, we were looking at ECOWAS as the umbrella body that captures implementation on gender issues. And we talked about regional NGOs. We gave instances of WACSOF, ActionAid, WILDAF, UN Women, WACSI, UNICEF, and the rest. And under strategies, we talked on agric and food security, believing that that's where we have dominance in female gender. And in that agric and food security, we also talked about land. We talked about resources, rural governance, leadership, trade facilitation, violence against women. And then under recommendation, we actually looked at financing and inputs, because in this female gender dominant area, we found out that they have little issues, not little, a huge one actually, in that area, and we recommended that for that gap that they have to actually come out effectively with their agric and food security processing, there has to be financing, resources of different sorts, and then we talked about on the land, we talked about access to land, because we all know that I don't know if I should use Nigeria as an instance, we know that access to land, our chairperson in our leader actually didn't have much problem with the access to land, because in some region from where she come from Gambia, and I don't think they have much of access to land when it comes to the female gender. But in a country like Nigeria, access to land for women is like a taboo. So basically, access to land is one of the issues that we recommend should be looked into. Maybe if there has to be change in policies at the local level where access to land could be granted. Access to power and leadership has actually always been a tussle. When you talk about gender equality doesn't apply much in access to power and leadership, because it hasn't been easy for us to achieve the affirmative action, talk less more of the extension of it. So basically, access to power and leadership is another recommended area we are to be looking into very seriously. Then implement policies on cross-border trading. That comes under trade facilitation, because sometimes you find out that women are the major produce of some of these food items and what have you. But you find out it's difficult for them to actually carry what they have produced to sell across borders and other places where they have high customers. So basically, it's very difficult to cross borders. So a lot of impediments around the border area, like too many securities, too many border issues that they cannot actually begin to address. So it becomes difficult for them. So we're looking at removing that barrier so that they can have access, same as their male counterpart does have. And we actually also talked about under violence against women, which is like a major issue for gender equality. We talked about to enforce and implement laws that already exist. And that can only be done through advocacy and create gender-specific laws and try to bring alive other laws that has actually been some other resolutions that have actually had issues being implemented at the regional levels, to see how we can begin to implement those through advocacy. And for also violence against women, we have to create safe spaces where issues that concerns women who have been violated can be taken care of. So these were the few we were able to come up with because there was no time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation.